They told me to come. Michael's voice on the phone, a little thin through the receiver but warm as summer sun, insisted. Dad, it just won't be the same without you. Thanksgiving needs you here. He'd laughed then, a sound I hadn't heard in months. Lily keeps asking when Grandpa is coming to see her treehouse. You can't let her down. I had been sitting in my old armchair, the one my wife always said molded itself to my worries, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the weak afternoon light. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a necessary ingredient, not an optional seasoning. So I packed. I packed the worn corduroy trousers that were comfortable for long flights. I packed the copy of the old seafaring novel I'd been meaning to finish for a decade, and I packed the gift. It was a music box, carved from a single block of maple from the old tree that used to stand in our backyard. It had taken me 4 months of careful work in my small basement workshop, the scent of wood shavings a constant comforting presence. On the lid, I'd carved a tiny, sleeping fawn, an exact replica of the one Lily had drawn for me last year. When you opened it, a small, intricate mechanism played a lullaby my wife used to hum. It was more than a gift. It was a piece of my heart, a repository of quiet hours and focused love. I built a small wooden crate for it, padding the inside with soft felt, as if I were transporting a fragile, sleeping bird. The day of the flight, my neighbor, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable, wished me a wonderful trip. "It's about time they had you out," she'd said, and I'd nodded, a swell of pride in my chest. I was a father who was wanted, a grandfather who was needed. The flight was long and smelled of recycled air and lukewarm coffee. I held the crate on my lap the entire way, my arms aching by the time we landed. But I wouldn't entrust it to the bumps and uncertainties of the overhead bin. This was a piece of me, a promise, and I would deliver it myself. When the plane touched down, a feeling of pure, unadulterated anticipation washed over me. I smoothed down my shirt, a new one I'd bought just for the occasion, and walked through the jet bridge with a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in years. I was ready to be claimed. I found a spot near the baggage claim, right under a large sign that declared, "Welcome to Seattle." People swirled around me in a joyful chaos of reunions. Hugs, tears, laughter. I stood with my small suitcase at my feet and the precious crate in my hands, a quiet lighthouse waiting for its ship to come in. I checked my phone. One new message from Michael, sent an hour ago. "Just leaving the house. Traffic is a mess. Kids are bouncing off the walls. Can't wait to see you." I smiled and sent a quick reply. Landed safe, by the welcome sign, no rush, and then I waited. I watched families merge and flow away, their voices fading into the general hum of the terminal. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The crowd thinned. The initial warmth of anticipation began to cool into a familiar, nagging chill. I checked my phone again. No new messages. I tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Michael. Leave a message." The cheerfulness in his recorded voice felt like a taunt. I didn't leave one. What would I say? "I'm here. Where are you?" The words felt needy, accusatory. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray, drizzly sky. 45 minutes. An hour. The terminal was nearly empty now. Just a few scattered travelers and the cleaning crew starting their slow, methodical rounds. I stood like a forgotten piece of luggage. The bright hope I'd carried with me across the country slowly deflating, leaving behind a hollow ache. I was a fool. a lonely old man who had mistaken a polite gesture for a genuine desire. It wouldn't be the same without you. The words echoed in my head, now sounding cruel and mocking. I was about to turn, to walk toward the taxi stand and book a flight back to the quiet emptiness of my own life, when a woman approached me. She was young, with kind, tired eyes and a hesitant expression. "Are you Arthur?" she asked softly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She took a breath, a deep, shaky one, and the look in her eyes was one I recognized. It was the look of someone about to break a heart, not out of malice, but out of necessity. "My name is Sarah," she said. I was a friend of Michael's." The past tense hit me like a physical blow. Was. She had said was. My mind refused to process it. I just stared at her, the music box in my hands suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. "There was an accident, Arthur," she continued, her voice cracking. "A few months ago. Michael and Jennifer and Lily. They didn't." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The world fell away. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The sounds of the airport faded into a dull roar. The invitation, the text message, the excitement. It was all a lie. A kind, terrible, soul-shattering lie. I wasn't forgotten. I was bereaved, and I hadn't even known it. The drive from the airport was a blur. Sarah drove, her husband Tom in the passenger seat, both of them wrapped in a heavy, respectful silence. I sat in the back, the world outside the window sliding by like a movie I wasn't watching. The rain had started, thin gray streaks against the glass. I didn't cry. The shock was a dam, holding back a flood of grief I knew would eventually break and drown me. I just felt a profound, bottomless numbness, Sarah explained in a soft, halting voice. Michael had been planning this Thanksgiving for a year. He'd been so excited. "He talked about it all the time," she'd said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "He wanted everything to be perfect for you. He bought your plane ticket back in August." After the accident, Sarah and Tom had found the ticket confirmation in Michael's emails. They couldn't bear the thought of me arriving to an empty house, of that hope turning to ashes alone in a silent airport. So they had made a decision. They had forwarded the flight details. They had sent the texts from Michael's old phone, which they'd kept. They had conspired to create a fiction, a gentle lie to shield me from the brutal truth, for just a little while longer. "We wanted to tell you," Tom said, turning to look at me, his face etched with sorrow. "But we couldn't find the right words. We just knew we couldn't let you arrive to nothing. He loved you so much. He wouldn't have wanted you to be alone." I nodded, though the gesture was mechanical, disconnected from any real thought. We arrived at their house, a modest, welcoming home on a street lined with dripping maple trees. Inside, it was warm and smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon. And everywhere, there were photographs. Photos of Sarah and Tom and their 2 young children, and mixed in among them, photos of my son. Michael and Tom on a fishing trip, grinning, holding up a ridiculously small fish. Jennifer and Sarah laughing, their arms around each other. And Lily. A school picture of her on the mantelpiece, her smile gap-toothed and radiant. My beautiful Lily. It was in that warm, quiet living room, surrounded by the evidence of a life my son had built, a life I had only seen in glimpses, that the dam finally broke. I sank into a chair, the wooden crate still clutched in my hands, and I wept. Not loud, racking sobs, but a quiet, steady weeping for the son I had lost, for the family that was gone, for the terrible, aching truth of a Thanksgiving table that would forever have 3 empty chairs. They didn't try to comfort me with words. They just let me grieve. Sarah brought me a glass of water. Tom stoked the fire. Their kindness was a soft blanket around my shattering heart. They were strangers, but in that moment, they felt more like family than anyone I had known. They were the keepers of my son's memory, the guardians of his love. And they had shown up for me in the most profound and compassionate way imaginable. They hadn't left me waiting. They had come to catch me as I fell. The rest of the day passed in a haze of gentle sorrow. Sarah and Tom's children, a boy and a girl a few years younger than Lily would have been, were quiet and respectful, moving around me with a cautious grace, as if they understood I was something fragile. We ate dinner at a large wooden table. It was a traditional Thanksgiving meal, the kind Jennifer had always tried to make. But hers had always felt a little strained, a performance for a holiday card. This was different. This was quiet and real. We didn't say much at first, but then Tom started telling a story about a camping trip he and Michael had taken in college, a story about a bear and a stolen cooler of beer. I'd never heard it before. I saw a version of my son I didn't know, young, reckless, and joyful. Sarah shared a memory of Jennifer, of how she had once spent a whole afternoon helping Sarah plant a garden, even though she hated getting her hands dirty. As they spoke, they painted a portrait of my son and his family that was more vibrant and detailed than anything I had ever seen. I had seen them as a father, from a distance, through the filter of holidays and brief phone calls. Sarah and Tom had seen them as friends, up close, in the messy, beautiful reality of everyday life. I had been so focused on the idea that they were forgetting me, that I had failed to see how much of their lives I was missing. It wasn't a judgment. It was just a sad, simple fact. After dinner, I sat by the fire, the warmth seeping into my cold hands. I had brought the crate with me from the car, and it sat on the floor beside my chair. Sarah's daughter, a quiet little girl named Anna, came and sat on the rug near me. She looked at the box. "What's in there?" she asked. I looked at her bright, curious eyes, so full of life, and I knew what I had to do. "It's a music box," I said, my voice hoarse. "I made it for my granddaughter." I placed the crate on my lap and opened it. The maple wood seemed to glow in the firelight. Anna gasped when she saw the sleeping fawn on the lid. I lifted the lid, and the tiny, clear notes of the lullaby filled the quiet room. It was a song of love, a song of loss, a song that now hung in the air, unmoored from its intended recipient. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered from the doorway. I looked at Anna, then back at her mother. "Lily would have loved it," I said. "But she can't have it now." "I want Anna to have it." Sarah started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Please," I said. "Love needs somewhere to go. It can't just stay locked in a box." I handed the music box to the little girl. She took it with a reverence that was beyond her years. She held it to her ear, her face a mask of wonder. In that moment, watching her, I felt a flicker of something that was not quite peace, but was close to it. It was a sense of continuation. My love for my granddaughter had found a new home. My son's legacy wasn't just in my memories. It was here, in this house, in the love of these friends who had become his family, and who were now, in some strange and unexpected way, becoming mine. I stayed with Sarah and Tom for a week. I slept in their guest room, a small, cozy space with a window that looked out onto their quiet, rain-soaked garden. Each morning, I would wake up to the smell of coffee and the soft sounds of a family getting ready for their day. It was a bittersweet symphony of slammed doors, childish arguments over cereal, and hurried kisses goodbye. It was everything my own house was not. I didn't want to be a burden, so I made myself useful. I fixed a loose cabinet door in their kitchen. I repaired a wobbly leg on their dining table. My hands, which had felt so empty and useless, found purpose again in the familiar language of wood and tools. Tom would watch me sometimes, a look of quiet admiration on his face. "Mike always said you could fix anything," he told me one afternoon. He tried to build a bookshelf once. It ended up looking like a parallelogram. We both laughed. It was in these small moments, these shared memories, that I began to heal. They told me about the treehouse, the one Michael had mentioned on the phone. They had built it together last summer in the backyard of my son's house, which now stood empty a few miles away. "He was so proud of it," Sarah said. "He couldn't wait for you to see it." One day I asked them to take me there. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The house looked smaller than I remembered, and sadder. The lawn was overgrown. A child's bicycle lay on its side near the porch, its wheels rusted. Tom unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. The air was stale and cold. Everything was just as they had left it. A stack of mail on the counter. A pair of Lily's small rubber boots by the door. It was a ghost ship. A vessel filled with the echoes of a life that had been abruptly, cruelly cut short. I walked through the rooms, each one a fresh wave of grief. In Lily's room, her drawings were still taped to the wall. One of them was of me, a stick figure with a wild halo of gray hair, holding a hammer. The caption read, "Grandpa can fix it." In the backyard, the treehouse stood in the branches of a large oak tree. It was a magnificent thing, sturdy and well-built, with a rope ladder and a small balcony. My son had built that, for his daughter, for me to see. I stood there for a long time, looking up at it, a monument to a future that would never happen. I realized then that my son hadn't been forgetting me. He had been actively trying to bring me closer, to weave me into the fabric of his life. The Thanksgiving invitation wasn't an afterthought. It was a culmination. He had wanted me there to witness his life, to see the man, the husband, the father he had become. And in the end, I had. Just not in the way either of us had planned. As we were leaving, I saw a framed photo on the hallway table, one I hadn't noticed before. It was of me, Michael, and Lily, taken a few years ago at a park. We were all laughing. I was holding Lily on my shoulders. I picked it up. "Can I have this?" I asked Sarah. "Of course," she said gently. I carried it out of the house, a single, tangible piece of a love that was not gone, just transformed. I wasn't just a man who had lost his family. I was a man who was discovering the true, expansive nature of what family could be. It wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up. And Sarah and Tom had shown up in a way that had saved me. The day before I was scheduled to fly back to my own empty house, Sarah found me in the kitchen, staring out at the rain. "You don't have to go, you know," she said quietly. I turned to look at her. "This isn't my home." "It could be," she said. "We have a small cottage in the back, behind the garden. It's mostly just for storage, but it has a bedroom, a small kitchen. We could fix it up. You could have your own space, your own workshop. You could be close." The offer hung in the air between us, a radical, life-altering proposition. To leave my home of 40 years, the house I had shared with my wife, the place where I had raised my son? It seemed impossible. But the thought of returning to that silence, to the ghosts that now surely waited for me there, was even more so. I thought about what my life had become, a series of quiet, solitary days, punctuated by the hope of a phone call, an invitation. A life lived in the waiting room of someone else's affection. Here, I was not waiting. I was present. I was needed, not for what I could provide, but for who I was, the keeper of Michael's childhood, the grandfather of a little girl they had also loved. I was a living link to their lost friend, and they were a living link to my lost son. We were a strange, cobbled-together family, bound not by blood, but by a shared and profound loss. "I don't know," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Think about it," she said. "There's no rush." The door is always open that night. I sat in the guest room and held the photograph I had taken from Michael's house. I looked at my own smiling face, at the pure joy in my son's eyes, at the unrestrained happiness of my granddaughter. We had been a family, a real one, and that love hadn't died. It had just changed its address. I realized that home isn't a place. It's not a collection of walls and furniture. It's the place where you are seen, the place where your presence matters, the place where, when you arrive, someone is there to welcome you. For years, I had thought that place was gone, but I was wrong. I had been waiting at the wrong gate. I didn't book a flight home. I sold my house. It happened faster than I expected. I hired a company to clear it out, to sell the furniture, to donate the things I no longer needed. I only asked them to ship one thing, the contents of my workshop. Every tool, every piece of salvaged wood, every jar of screws and nails. Those were the pieces of my life that still fit. I moved into the small cottage behind Sarah and Tom's house. It took us a month to fix it up. We painted the walls a soft, warm yellow. Tom, who was surprisingly handy for a man who claimed he couldn't build a bookshelf, helped me install new cabinets in the kitchen. Sarah planted a small garden of herbs outside my window. It was a space that was entirely my own, yet I was not alone. I could hear the faint sounds of their life through the trees, the laughter of their children, the music from their kitchen radio. It was a comforting presence, a reminder that I was part of something. I built my new workshop in the garage. The day my tools arrived, I felt like a man reunited with a lost part of his soul. I unpacked each one with care, placing them on the new shelves I had built. The familiar weight of my father's old hammer in my hand, the smooth, worn handle of my favorite chisel. These were my companions, my confidants. They had been with me through everything. I started building again, not out of obligation, but out of joy. I built a new, sturdier treehouse for Anna and her brother. I built a rocking horse for a neighbor's new baby. I built simple, beautiful pieces of furniture for my own small home. My hands were happy. My heart was healing. I spoke to my old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, on the phone. She told me a young family had bought my house. They had 2 small children. She said they were happy. I was glad. The house deserved to be filled with life again. It deserved a new story. One day, a letter arrived. It was from a lawyer. Michael and Jennifer had named me as the sole beneficiary of their life insurance policy. It was a substantial amount of money, enough to ensure I would be comfortable for the rest of my days. But it wasn't the money that moved me. It was the simple, undeniable proof. They had been thinking of me. They had been planning for my future, even as they were living their own. I used a portion of the money to set up a college fund for Sarah and Tom's children. It was the only thing that felt right. It was what Michael would have wanted. Life settled into a new rhythm. A rhythm of purpose, of quiet joy, of belonging. I was no longer a man waiting by the phone. I was a man with a life of his own. A life enriched by the unexpected gift of a new family. And if you are out there, if you have ever stood in a crowded room and felt utterly alone, if you have ever waited for a door to open that remained stubbornly closed, I want you to know this. Family is not always the one you are born into. Sometimes it is the one you find. Sometimes it is the one that finds you. And home is not a place you return to. It is a place that is waiting for you. A place where, when you finally arrive, you are not a guest. You are seen. You are known. You are, at long last, welcome.